All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cyber Spotlight. Thanks for joining us today. I'm joined by Chng from BMO. He is the Senior Advisor for the Financial Crimes Unit. Lester, thank you for joining the show today. How are you?
Thank you. No problem, Stephen. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. We're on opposite sides of the country of Canada here, and it's awesome to be able to talk about the same thing when it comes to cybersecurity. First thing I'd like to do is just dig into a little bit of your background. You obviously have extensive experience in the Navy and kind of wargaming and some really cool areas to security and stuff like that, some different experiences that you bring into it. So I guess let's just start with what motivated you to get into cybersecurity in the first place.
Yeah. So thanks for the question, Stephen. So I think cybersecurity, it when I transited out of the Navy, I was looking, okay, what am I gonna do next? Where can I bring my experience at? Where would I be the best value for my next employee or next career path that I can go into? And I think cyber one is a really emerging space where we can see that the threat is real and getting closer to home or wherever you are. It's an undeniable threat that is just not going to go away, I think, anytime in the near future. And when I thought about it, it has a lot of parallels with being in military defense, right? So you get there's a known enemy, although maybe not as known as what we are used to in the military, but that's where we employ the same defense attack concepts, planning for how we're going to deal with incidents, planning for how we're going to shore up our defense, deterrence, especially a lot of teamwork. I think teamwork is something that I appreciated dearly in the military, and I'm sure if you ask many veterans, it's something that they miss a lot when they do leave the service.
Mm-hmm.
And I think cybersecurity does provide that because in just working together with whether it's operations team or any of the various arms of cybersecurity, whether it's network teams, identity management teams, we really need to have that cohesiveness and collaboration in order to deal with the existing threat. So I think that was my motivation. It's an emerging space. There are many parallels to military defense, and I think that's where it motivated me to best leverage on my experience.
Yeah, like it sounds like you have it's a relevant crossover there in a lot of ways, and that's just an interesting background. I haven't interviewed anyone else with that type of skill set. So we'll get more into what the teamwork side of things mean. If you say you're at a party, you're at some type of mixer, and you have to, somebody's like, "What do you do, Lester?" And you have to
Yeah.
explain to them kind of quickly what you do. What is it that you normally go to say that you do when it comes to working at the bank?
Yeah. So I think a clear, easy way to explain it is I design and conduct exercises that bring the response teams into scenarios where they wish they never had to deal with, but I give them this space and the flexibility and take away the pressures from having to deal with a real incident. And that's where I give them that platform to walk through and think through all the different issues that they would face, touch wood on the bad day when it does come. So in that case, I really help to increase the operational readiness of all the response teams. So it gives them a platform to think, gives them time and space to think through what will they do if that day actually eventually we all say, right, it's not if but when nowadays when the attack will happen. So my job is to make sure that they've seen it before. They don't freeze in the face of adversity, and that's where it really shores up the operational readiness.
What would you say is the most satisfying part about your job now?
I think the satisfying part of my job is really when we do present the scenarios, and it's not easy to talk about difficult scenarios like that, and nobody wants to talk about, okay, you don't have your stuff together, you don't have your documentation together, you don't have your tools tuned properly. And I think it's satisfying where people are open and understand the value of the work that I do, and it does translate into improvements, whether it's people, whether it's their skill sets, whether it's processes, or other things that we didn't write down because when we hand it over to the next team, they have no idea what we're talking about. Is there a gap in the process? or is there a gap in our technology? Is there something that there's a huge gap that without this exercise we wouldn't have seen, because everyone has so many things to do. Yes, you can have your gap analysis, your overall architecture, but there are always gaps because one team may not talk to the other team and they have difference in assumptions and even understanding what the problem is. So I think that's where it's satisfying, where you present a problem not to find issues, but there are always areas to improve. So I think that's what is satisfying.
Yeah, that makes sense. And kind of further on that, there's at a big organization, there's different sides of the organization. So there's the business side.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the main misconceptions that maybe the business side might have about somebody maybe in your position in the planning, the disaster planning side of things, cybersecurity side of things? Like what's a misconception you think they often or sometimes might have?
I think one of the misconceptions is they feel that we exaggerate things a bit, but I think one of the sort of the key tenets of how we design scenarios, we design it based on whatever has happened before. So it's realistic, it has happened before, people have dealt with it, it's a similar scale. So it's not always a nuclear holocaust scenario all the time, which we know is plausible, but not likely. So business thinks that okay, this may never happen or not, or you're exaggerating things, but we always rely on no, these are the facts, this has happened to company X before, so let's face the difficult question and try and answer it as best as we can, and if there are gaps, then let's work on it.
How does identity play into your kind of vision of cybersecurity in general in our kind of modern work world and environment?
I think identity is very important, especially for in the banking industry. You need to validate whether it's the correct person you're sending money to, the correct person logging into the accounts. So I think it's something that we are very cognizant of, that needs to be improved, whether it's multi-factor to validate the identity, or we have different ways of validating it, whether it's a callback to customers, ensuring that it's not a threat actor that's actually trying to mimic that. So I think that is many a times the sort of the first step into giving us some sensing that something is wrong, when and there's something that we always question. Okay, is this is this action legitimate? How do we validate the identity? How do we then reset the passwords if we have any doubt in that? And how do we have a check back with customers? So I think that's certainly very important in cybersecurity defense, because that's one of the attack surface that threat actors would definitely leverage on.
Yeah, totally. And you just touched on it earlier. You were talking about, communication within the organization, teamwork on disaster planning and recovery and response. We talked earlier about how, people say cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. And I think they usually say that on like a preventative way. Like it's don't click on these links. It's everyone's got to be a part of it. And that's true. But like you said, it's a cliche. How do you feel like that everyone's responsibility from an enterprise level looks when it comes to like responding to threats or attacks within the organization?
So I think that's a great point, because it's always easy to say, yeah, it's everyone's responsibility, but we all know that when it's everyone's responsibility, it's no one's responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think from a response point of view, I think cybersecurity incidents, while we realize that the cybersecurity practitioners will be the ones leading the investigation, the ones trying to rectify the issue, but we often forget that it impacts almost every part of the business, whether it's operations, whether it's communications. And I think on the communications point, just to expand on that a bit, just things like regulatory notification. Okay, who do you need to notify? Your customers, if they hear a whiff of it on social media, how does your contact center respond? If there are media inquiries about they've heard something happening on the grapevine or through whatever sources that they have, do we proactively respond to that? Do we have holding statements? Are we ready to talk about it? And yeah, so I think just on one communication, or are we even legally allowed to talk about it? Those are things that I think through exercises which I run the program, that's where we have those questions. We have How do we control the narrative? Who is the central point of the facts? Because in an investigation, it's a lot of it is unknown, and we may never know it for the entirety of the investigation. So how then do we have alignment on the narrative and then present a unified front and unified response from, I guess, in this case, the whole of bank approach on how we deal with an incident. So it's a lot of areas that, and cyber incident that would impact all other areas. So I think just looking at communication is just one small part of it, but it has so many areas that's going to be impacted.
Yeah, and that's fascinating because we all know on the cybersecurity side of things that if big breaches are obviously massive problems to modern businesses that rely fully on their IT infrastructure to be functional. So when you're on the preventative planning side of things, on your profile, so I use the term, I think, wargaming, like you're like gaming scenarios on like how these things could go out. It sounds very intense and kind of epic, but if you think about it, it is, BMO, one of the 5 big banks in Canada. It's got a lot of people's money there and they care a lot about that. So I guess prevention, it's great that an organization like you guys have the resources and the time to put someone in like you in charge of going ahead and asking the questions like, yeah, what will we do if this happens? Do you find you get a lot of buy-in from people on these planning things, or is it kind of like everyone's like, oh, it's that time of the month, we got to go do the wargaming or whatever?
I think initially, yes, but I believe people eventually see the value of it because, like, again, back to my earlier point, it's a difficult question. Nobody is comfortable to answer it. But I think that's where the running an exercise buys the space and it gives people the freedom to fail because we it's a non-judgmental space that we run these exercises in. There's no, I mean, yes, we always say that there's no wrong answer, but in reality, there will be a wrong answer if you say the wrong things in media. If you do take the wrong actions, it's gonna be you're gonna have consequences. So I think exercises provides that space for people to make mistakes, buys time for people to think about it because we all know in an incident when it happens, it's all bang bang bang. There's no time to deal with it before you rectify one area, things pop up in other areas. So yeah, I think that's where wargaming this, looking at it from a all possibilities angle, I think that's where we try our best to cover all the areas. Yes, on the actual day, we may not have thought of something, but I think that's where running through robust exercises gives us, firstly, the confidence that we have covered most of our bases, and we have be well prepared. Like a lot of companies and teams have incident response plans, they have playbooks or well written, but you don't go to the gym and read about it and then expect to be lifting 100 kilos the next day. So this exercise are just a means to practice that, and that's where you find gaps in your response in your playbooks, which is fine, and that's where it's a continuous improvement process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Yeah, does this playbook actually work? Can we actually execute it, type thing? Yeah, it's cool to hear about the preventative side of things in that area. So yeah, thanks for kind of showing us a little bit of your world that you operated there. If people want to know more about that, or they want to connect with you to maybe get whatever services from your experience, where can they best find you? How can they contact you?
I think they can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm fairly responsive there, and yeah, I'm happy to share experience, whether it's within the financial industry or even in my past life as a Navy officer. How do I run war games? What are the parallels of naval war gaming or military war gaming do they have, and how does it relate to cyber defense or even security in that area?
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of ways, and I read some of your material on your LinkedIn, and it's great. So anyone watching this, I encourage you, click the link below. We'll have that there. And yeah, Lester, thanks so much for coming on the Cyber Spotlight. To those of you watching, I'm Stephen Boughton, the host, as always, and stay tuned to the channel. Make sure you subscribe to not miss our future episodes with other bright minds like Lester's. Lester, thanks, and have a great night.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much.